Okay, welcome to another Tools for Change webinar. Today we are looking at sort of maybe a different topic from what we usually engage with, but it's something that has come up a number of times in conversations with some of you, and the idea of nation transformation as an additional maybe parameter or idea for the kind of work that we're engaged in that has grown out of things like organization development and collaborative change. What are some of the challenges? Is it possible? Or some of the ideas around that is what I'd like to look at together today. So what is nation transformation? Does it work? There certainly isn't a magic wand. I think that any of us are aware of, that you could just turn the puppet into a boy, as this Pinocchio image here would suggest. I think many of us have taken history classes and are familiar with some of the more typical nation transformers, may they be through elections or war or economic change or climate change or racial tensions. One that's been at my sort of personal story, and as well as recently as in my past, is the idea of independence from maybe a colonial power. I grew up in East Germany, so the reality of really being a satellite or a colonial state of the mighty Soviet power certainly was a reality I grew up with. On that specifically, one of the reasons that this resonates with me, this theme resonates with me, the convening mechanism, if you will, after the Berlin Wall fell, the government and the opposition engaged in a process that they called the round table, der runde Tisch. Ironically, as you can see in the little image here on the slides, that round table was rectangular, but the idea nonetheless was that they had a number of representatives from some of the larger churches in East Germany that were the moderators, and then you had representation from the outgoing, if you will, government and opposition parties that negotiated the processes that eventually led to the two Germanys being reunited on October 3rd in 1990, sort of as the outcome of what we call the Revolution of Candles in '89. And that process was absolutely critical to there being a peaceful conversation that had individuals and their stakeholders literally at the table and being heard. Another sort of place near and dear to my heart, I was really blessed to be in Guyana last week for a surprise honeymoon that my dearest sort of sprung on me wonderfully. And it's an incredible place, very diverse. My family, or my wife's family, to be exact, is part Portuguese, part Indian, as in the subcontinent, and part African. Those are the three that we're sure of. You might imagine that there isn't exactly the kind of record keeping that my family in East Germany was privy to, with church books and death certificates and all that. So it's potentially that there's more than those three. I have cousins and nieces and nephews now that, in addition to the Indian, the Portuguese, and the African, also have Chinese and British and Amerindian, which is what they call their Native American populations. However, at the moment, today is sort of a really tense day in Guyana. They had an election on Monday. And it seems that, like in many places, that election has been boiled down to an us versus them of the two major parties. The PPP, which is predominantly voted for and represented through the Indo-Guyanese population, and the former PNC. They're in a coalition now. It's called APNU and AFC, but they are majority represented through the Afro-Guyanese population. So you have the descendants of slaves and the descendants of indentured servants, or slavery 2.0, as my daughter calls it, that sort of are juxtaposed in a country that really is otherwise very diverse. And I was privy to big celebrations and parties where all these folks are celebrating together, yet today there's a lot of racial tension around these election outcomes. So I want to talk with you a little bit and actually use what I think is a critical piece of having nation transformation kinds of conversations. It's my conviction based on what I saw and experienced in East Germany and what I've seen in my travels. I've been really blessed to be just about everywhere except for Australia and Antarctica so far. And the core to any of these processes is dialogue. And in those dialogues, if the participants don't feel like they actually have a voice that's being heard, then it's not really dialogue. So one of the key values, key features that I think the work that Nexus is trying to do and that many of you are engaged in is around looking to leverage methodologies and approaches of how can we have good, healthy, meaningful dialogue. One of the simplest tools that I'm aware of that comes across my desk a lot of times is from Liberating Structures. It's this 1, 2, for all. And it really is sort of reflective of the individual group whole that most facilitators, most conveners of any sort of larger group engagements do in much of their practice. And so I would love if we could trial that together. There is currently 6 of us in the session, so maybe we'll do a 1, 2, 3 all instead of a 1, 2, 4 all. But the idea would be, what is your idea? What is your thought on nation transformation and it working? And we'll start with 1 minute that you sort of maybe jot down some notes, some reactions thus far for yourself. Then we'll go into breakout groups and pairs. So 2 of each of us. Then we'll come back and we'll go into a second set of breakout rooms where it'll be 3 of us in each of the rooms. And then we'll come back and share. And so what that will look like is you'll get a little button that will pop up on your screen after the initial minute. It'll say the host has invited you, please join the breakout room. You'll click on that button and you'll have 2 minutes as a pair and then 4 minutes, the 3 of us. So let's start with the clock here for 1 minute. And what are some of your initial reactions on nation transformation? Okay, I'm going to send you to breakout rooms with 1 partner each. Yeah, so what do you have any thoughts, any reactions initially?
One comes in the form of a response I had from somebody who, when we were talking about immigration, and this person is advocating for controls, stronger controls at the border, saying that we can't afford in this country to, how structures are already in place for non-in-person being together. And we just wondered what were the, at least I'm wondering, what are the implications for country level healing, if that's really what we're talking about, when you're not in each other's breath, so to speak.
Good question.
Thank you. Who else wants to share?
I'll pop in with one theme that I think came up at the first 2 levels. The theme of Ted labeled it as entry points, or non-polarizing, non-binary, larger identity kinds of entry points to try to minimize or prevent polarization. And then another theme that I think I heard a number of times, actually I heard it from Keith, the idea of small pilots trying things out. He used the phrase scale up and spread. And then one other thing that this actually came from Carol, and I look at it as the question, where can this be started, in what arenas? And she suggested education and healthcare as candidates.
Great ideas.
Carol or Keith, did you want to add something?
The only thing that I would add, this is Keith, is something that I learned about a long time ago was, Everett Rogers' diffusion of innovation theory. And, what are the characteristics of what it is that you're trying to spread or scale at a country level, and challenging ourselves, is what we're trying to scale, how can we make it more successfully scalable? By looking at some of, for example, Everett Rogers' work on the characteristics of the innovation we're trying to scale. To say it differently, I think sometimes people are trying to scale something that by its nature is not very scalable. And that's the importance of pilot testing, in part, is to challenge ourselves to be pilot testing the scalability characteristics, or those characteristics of the innovation that are more likely to be successfully, so that it's more successfully scaled, and how much how can we challenge ourselves to learn more about those characteristics during the pilot stages versus getting into a situation where we try to scale an intervention that is not really designed to be operating well at scale. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think the thing that brings it all together for me is being conscious of what structures you can put into the pilot and move forward. That it's it's basically a systems approach and not a one-off. And pilots allow you to look at the whole system and experiment. I'm complete.
Thank you. Yeah. Roland, you have some pertinent specific experience that you had indicated you might be willing to share a little bit about. So
Yes. This is the Philippines. From our change blueprint, 5 or 6 community leaders will be identified along with the role that they will play in eradicating poverty and the countrywide transformation. So the Philippines has 250 states or communities. We now have all 250 involved. And now we got to figure out where to go. Oh, and so here's the concluding thing. This is a pilot because then it goes to India. I've identified the top OD person in India. I'm biased, but Parasu, he's from Tata. And this will go then to Ghana and Africa. And Gabriel is chomping and ready to go, Dr. Gabriel. He's the head of health of the whole freaking country. Head of health. And
this is in Ghana?
Ghana. Gabriel, I created the most significant transformation in the country. That's what he said. I can't tell you that story now. And so then we go to China. We have China ready to go. I've been working there with Li Lu for 10 years. And he's from Taiwan. But I haven't talked, we're going to talk in a couple of days, find out what's going to do. What we want to really do is to bring in Peter Block with my daughter to do a training, so to speak. And then we've got the University of Chicago sticking their nose in all of this. They want to evaluate it all and research it and teach it in Chicago, in the United States, and in China.
So what I'm hearing you say, though, that's interesting is that what you shared about Ghana is that one of the key folks in the conversation is connected to healthcare, which we talked about might be one of the arenas that would allow an entry point.
Not might be. We're committed. We're
right.
ready to go.
And with the current coronavirus crisis, that really seems to be a pertinent subject that I think might be an opportunity for many a nation to start a conversation around some of this that wouldn't be preset with all the typical binary strains in political conversation with hopefully a shared interest.
You can't have the politics at all.
We are about 10 minutes over, guys, and I want to honor our time together. Roland, thank you for that glimpse into big things to come. Carol, you're shaking your head intensely.
I'm overwhelmed by the scale. You know, the conversation from 1 to 4,
right,
all, which is all of 6 people, to the nations of the world. Incredible place to be playing.
I'm interrupting, I'm sorry, but on the black burner, we have John Scheer ready to transform Poland with my process.
Well, and I'm in touch with him thanks to you and Linnea to write a chapter.
Carol?
Can we have a one-word checkout from Bruce and Keith?
If people have time to do that, absolutely. Why don't you go ahead, Carol, and do a one-word checkout?
Intrigued. Want more.
Okay, who next?
I'll go with the word scaling.
Keith, how about you?
I would say curious.
Okay,
Mystical.
mystical. I'm gonna say grateful, and I thank you all so much, and we'll talk to you soon, I hope. Thank you all.
Okay.